chapter and what is it that we are doing. L&D Global is a worldwide network of learning and development practitioners. The network has over 30,000 members across industries, countries and cultures as well. Now the network has been founded by our dear Mr. Surya Prakash Partha. He's a very senior industry thought leader in HR space. The mission of L&D Global is popularly known as 3 C's. They stand for collaborate, co-create, and contribute. So that's about the L&D Global chapter, and we feel very proud to be having this Kolkata chapter and doing all these programs and having such a lovely gathering. And as Rasna was saying that we could also see a lot of repeat people coming in, and that shows the enthusiasm that is getting created in Kolkata chapter. I take this honor on the behalf of L&D Global Kolkata chapter to welcome our guest speaker for the evening, Professor Partha Ray. If I have to talk about his little bit of background, he has been a thorough person into economics and finance industry. So he's currently a professor of economics at Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, where he teaches courses on macroeconomics, global political economy, issues in monetary policies and crisis and contagion. He has been actively involved with teaching in various executive development programs and consulting projects. And between the tenure of 2007 and 2011, he was an advisor to the Executive Director of India at the International Monetary Fund at Washington, D.C. Prior to this, he was working as a specialist cadre of economist in Reserve Bank of India's Economic Research Department. And this tenure was quite long, since 1989 till 2006, various capacities. His last position was the Director of Department of Economic and Policy Research for Reserve Bank in India. Professor Ray has been his education has been spread across different areas, primarily in Kolkata, Mumbai, and also in Oxford. And he's an avid writer, and he has written many books, related to Indian economy, global financial crisis, monetary policy, banking and finance, and the list goes on. And if I start reading all these lists and books, it's going to get us the entire evening if I start reading those books. So I'll stop myself here, and I will quickly hand over the mic to Professor Ray, so that I don't waste any time and start listening to his knowledgeable experience and about his deliberations today. So welcome, Professor Rai. The mic is all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chakraborty. When Mr. Datta first time approached me that I could give a talk, with some trepidation I accepted it. Am I audible loud and clear? Or
yes, very much.
Okay. Yeah. So with some trepidation I accepted. I realized there's a group of eminent people who are quite exposed to this. So as an economist, what do I do with them? So I thought one of the things I could do is to talk of the current situation.
Just a second, sir. I will put everybody on mute.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah. So you would have to unmute yourself once again.
Yes. Am I clear?
Yes,
audible?
absolutely.
Okay. So thanks, Mr. Chakraborty, for a generous introduction. The trouble is it builds up an expectation. And then end of it, the participants must be thinking, hey, this guy must have introduced someone else and not him. So I hope no such thing is going to happen in the end. I have a slide, but as you understand, power corrupts and PowerPoints corrupts absolutely. So I'll sort of not stick to it, but have something in the background. We can have the Q&A later, but somebody has a two-handed intervention, feel free to interject me at any point of time. Okay. Yes. Is it visible, the screen? Is the screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you can see the screen. Okay, so as I name it, is kind of speculative and sharing collective confusion. The reason for collective confusion is we are in this very much. We don't have the luxury of historical data, of an objective distance from which you view the whole thing and say such and such has happened. So whatever is current, the trouble is I predict tomorrow, and tomorrow comes out to be absolutely wrong prediction. So that's a thing. We all know that that at this juncture, what's going to happen, and the numbers look not very impressive, pretty bad. But end of it, the confirmed cases is something like 4.1, 4.2 million, and death of something like 282,000 world over. Very interestingly, you tend to hear China all the time when it comes to this COVID-19 virus, and you realize, hey, China, the number of deaths, I mean, I don't know the Chinese data, the veracity of Chinese data, the China number of deaths is only 4,633, whereas the advanced countries are much more. United States being the leader, 80,000 plus, number of deaths I'm referring to, Spain, 26,000, United Kingdom, 31, Italy, 30,000, France, 26,000. These are large numbers of a country which is otherwise advanced economy and which otherwise has a low population. Now, how much are we bothered? Is it the end of history? Now, I guess to begin with, I thought I'll just have a look at the history a little bit. And to my utter surprise, I found out that when it comes to economic impact, there's possibly one answer. The answer being, it is widespread, and that currently this is globalized world. And I looked at some of the major historical pandemics, and lo and behold, say for example, HIV between 2005 to 12, the death toll is 36 million. I mean, there are flu pandemic 1918. This was something like 20 to 50 million people have died. So the number, as I have showed a minute back, is much lower right now. But why are we bothered? First, it is current, and therefore your life you value more than an earlier generation's life. More importantly, this shows limitation of two things. It shows limitations of human advancement and therefore modern medical sciences. And it also shows the limitation of public health facility. Because those countries where these things are happening, you expect people are in much good shape in terms of health configuration, but the public health services in many of those countries are not exactly very, very good. In fact, if I just go back to the earlier slide, you realize the countries which are conspicuous, these are the top 40 countries in terms of the confirmed cases. The countries which are conspicuously absent are the Scandinavian countries. And why is that so? One of the reasons being, apart from their good health, but other European people also should be in equally good health, there is a very good public health system. So it shows two things. It shows limitation of the medical sciences. In that sense, we are yet to have the vaccination. And it shows the limitation of public health services. With this broad introduction, I'm no virologist, I'm no medical scientist, I'm an economist. So I look at the economic effects of the coronavirus, and therefore at times I'll be heartless. At times I will measure them in money. I understand measuring death in terms of money is not exactly the right thing to do. All deaths are very, very important, for whom the bell tolls, you all know. But end of it, I'm taking that very hedonistic approach and look at the number of purely in terms of the money value. Okay. When it comes to growth, the global growth and growth of GDP, that's one number everybody and their uncle looks at. That how is the growth perspective look like? IMF and World Bank together releases these growth numbers twice a year. Once in April, once in October. This year, under certain special circumstances, they released the number of January. So what does it show? First, it shows that in 2020, global growth is going to be contracted by -3%. So in other words, if the GDP last year was 100, this year the GDP is going to be 97. The advanced economy, this is abysmally awful picture. Their growth number is 6.1 minus. So it's minus 6.1 that the advanced economies are going to go at into 2020. And various countries, you get to see awful number. United States minus 5.9, Euro area minus 7.5, so on and so forth. When it comes to emerging economies, you get to realize that in this column of 2020, the only two positive numbers are India and China. But their number is also pretty bad. India's number 2020 this year is 1.9. We are accustomed with a growth rate of 6, 7, 8%. In fact, with 6% growth rate, we become very, very sad occasionally. Therefore, this is very, very important that we are growing at, expected to grow at 1.9, and China is expected to grow at 1.2. So among the big economies, excepting India and China, everybody else, the GDP is getting contracted. And that's bad news. That's bad news for business. That's bad news for employment. That's bad news for even the education sector, a sector like yours. Okay, and low-income countries is not very good. I'm not going to country-specific details. But what's more interesting to realize, how much of this minus number is due to coronavirus? So what I have done, I have looked at the IMF estimate in January and taken the difference in April. So how much of the January predictions been revised in April? That's what I've looked at in the second slide. So look at this particular column, which essentially is the rectangle column. The world output, that gives it difference between the January 2020 and now April 2020. The world output has been revised downwards by 6.3%. Advanced economies GDP has been revised downwards by 7.7%. I'm in this business, in the business of economics for the last 35 years. I have not seen such big revision. And when I see this, I remember the East Asian crisis. I remember the global financial crisis of 2008. So in that sense, this is much more widespread and much more deeper than all the earlier crises. Now, even for emerging markets and developing economies, it is bad. It is something like minus 5.4. So it was revised downwards to that extent. Again, I'm not going through country-specific things. If you feel like, you can ask me questions during later. But then what I have told you, we do not know enough. As I said earlier, we are in this session sharing our collective ignorance and collective confusion. Why you do not know? We still do not know the pathway of the pandemic. We do not know the intensity and efficiency of the containment effort. We do not know the supply distortions. We do not know how much the global financial markets is going to nosedive. Because if the global financial markets nosedives, if the Wall Street experiences a fall, the mainstream also faces a crisis. And whether this will lead to certain behavioral changes. You are scared to go to a shopping mall. You are scared to go for a movie theater. And apart, the coronavirus does not come alone. There are collateral damages. So in some cases, it becomes a multi-layered crisis. It could be health shock, domestic economic distortions, plummeted external demand for any country, island countries, which hugely depend upon the external demand, they are going to be affected. There could be capital flow reversals. For example, if capital flow reversal becomes very, very acute, tomorrow rupee might go to something like 80 or 82, and that's not good news. And the commodity prices might collapse, as you have seen in the oil market. And there are risks of a worse outcome that could predominate. Again, these are caveats. We do not know whether this is going to happen, but we are sort of saying there is always a doomsday scenario. Fortunately, over the last 50 to 70 years of economic forecasting, we have not seen doomsday happening very often. But when you are in the crisis, you tend to emphasize the importance of a doomsday. I'll very, very shortly, I'll show you what's going to happen. In this case, these lines, these blue lines in the right-hand side, it shows how much deep has become the current recession, the current recessionary trends. So this is huge. So if you see that in 2020 Q1, the output was something like 100, the output has become less than 90 at the current juncture. That's not good news. Okay. So the immediate priority, what's the immediate priority then? The immediate priority, government, of course, government needs to increase the health expenditure, adopt measures that reduce contagion. We have, each crisis gives us a new term. This crisis has given us this term called lockdown. That's one. And the economic policies need to cushion the impact of the deadline of all these declines on three agents: people, firms, and the financial system. And not necessarily the same thing affects all of them very favorably. For example, if a poor guy gets a life without a livelihood, that's a bad news. So you need to provide the life by giving him or her the life-saving drugs, by giving him or her good hospitalization. At the same time, you need to provide the person with a means of livelihood. And the policies need to reduce persistent scarring effect and need to ensure that economic recovery should begin very quickly. But this year, it's bad. We are expecting at least from the June quarter, something like some recovery starts to. Okay, I'll skip this financial markets condition. What has been impact on Asia? The peculiar thing comes up. All the advanced countries in Asia, and by basically 5 to 7 countries in Asia in advance, which is Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Macau. SAR stands for Special Administrative Region. They are treated part of China for political purpose. All of them 2020 projections are negative. But yes, I have shown you earlier the projection for China and India are 1.2, 1.9. They're not necessarily good absolutely, but relatively speaking, they're much better. And as I have seen in the very first slide, contrary to popular belief, if you believe the Chinese numbers, the impact of the pandemic has been low on China, despite the fact it was the originator. Okay, I was asked to talk around half an hour. So I'll come to Indian impact at this current juncture. So what do you expect the Indian scenario to be? Now, one trouble with the Indian situation is like if you get a heart attack, when you're already weak in your health, the impact is going to be more. That's precisely that has happened for India. Why so? Even before the coronavirus attack, Indian economy has been slowing down. The growth numbers have been quite bad. In that sense, we have something like 9 quarters deceleration. The last growth numbers of 1920 Q3, that is 2019 October to December, that turned out to be 4.7%. And by this time, we have become somewhat arrogant that we expected the normal growth rate should be 6 to 7%. So 4.7%, we were disheartened. Now that was already happening. So there was 9 quarters deceleration. Investments has been slowing for some time. Consumption slowing has joined in. There was legacy problem like NPA in the financial sector. Number of banks has huge non-performing assets, a euphemism for bad debt. There were power sector had a huge problem. You had all those special power sector Udaya bonds, which essentially government money was pumped in to get rid of the power sector losses. And last year was bad. 2019 was bad in terms of financial stress. You have seen the ILFS crisis, and the non-banking financial companies have been affected adversely by contagion. And you have seen the crisis in the PMC bank, and all this along with the slowing employment growth. So we're not in very healthy situation when the coronavirus affected us. So please do appreciate that point. Okay, how much will be the impact? This is one of the leading investment banks have estimated something, and to my utter horror, I realized that in terms of retail and recreational activity, among the Asian countries, India's downfall has been the most. This is significant, something like, if you take the baseline of December, is something like -81. This is one bad news. And next bad news is, whereas, how do you solve it? In such situation, government needs to pump money. All over the world, governments, through fiscal policies, through tax cut, through certain government expenditure, government started spending huge amount of money. Unfortunately, that spending in India as percent of GDP is pretty low. It's only 0.8%. I'll explain later why this is low, why India government has been constrained in terms of spending more in terms of fiscal stimulus. So we were affected adversely, and the government of India could not spend that much. That's like kind of a double value. Why this is coming? One of the things of a globalized world is you are scared of the rating agencies. Why are you scared of the rating agencies? Because the investors, the global investors who do not know enough about India, they look at those numbers, A, BB plus, BB positive, so on and so forth. Now, India government is quite concerned. They didn't say it in these many terms. No government will ever say that they're scared about rating agency. But they know one thing, a further increase in fiscal deficit is going to be bad news for the economy, and they might face a rating downgrade. What's the flip side of the rating downgrade? The flip side of rating downgrade is that capital will be withdrawn from India. From foreign institutional investors, the hedge fund, the private equity fund, all this money will go out. Therefore, portfolio investment may be downfall. That is going to affect your stock price. That is going to affect your rupee-dollar exchange rate. That is going to affect your bond yield. Since all these important financial indicators are affected, they are going to affect your business end of the day. They might not have a one-on-one correspondence. There might not be a daily correspondence, but in the medium term, there will be similar things. Okay. And how much will this impact? If you purely look at, and at least in the last withdrawal of lockdown, how much is the exempted and how much has been at least affected? 60% of the sectors have been affected. Since 60% of the sectors have been affected, you are expecting to that extent GDP is going to go down. And GDP is going to go down, affects everyone. It's not only output, remember, it is demand. And remember, somebody's expenditure is somebody else's income. It's like for me, if my students do not come to me, end of the month, I may not get my salary if I'm paid by the money of my students. So the student's expenditure is the teacher's salary. And the same analogy goes everywhere. So if we do not spend enough, and at this juncture, that's very, very difficult. There are sectors we're not spending. The whole entertainment industry we're not spending. The manufacturing sector has come to a standstill, and the SME sector has been hugely affected. Okay, how do you see the impact in terms of the states? If you purely look at the share of the red zones, I mean, Delhi is not exactly a state, it's a city-state, so forget Delhi. Among others, I mean, we all know Maharashtra in general and Mumbai in particular has been hugely affected. And therefore, to that extent, you have your red zone. More red zone means more bad news. More red zone essentially means that you are going to be affected in this structure. And the right side panel, I have described how much is a particular state important. For example, West Bengal's share in the Indian GDP is something like 6%, as against Maharashtra's share is 14%. So when Maharashtra is hugely adversely affected, apart from human loss, apart from loss of human life, the sheer GDP also is affected hugely. So to cut a long story short, since in this case, one of the richest states have been affected more by the COVID-19 attack, you're expecting the GDP to fall to that extent. And this 1.9% estimate of IMF looks to be at this juncture quite exuberant. We do not know how far this number will turn out in December 2020. In May, we are expecting it 1.9. In December, what's the number going to be? So almost at the end, let me sum up. We are indeed in unknown and uncharted territory. Therefore, let me have no arrogance. Let me be polite to say that we strive to share our collective confusion, ignorance. Please note, human life losses is a great loss. Along with this, there are adverse economic impact. The adverse economic impact will also be the people who have not been snatched away by death. And the final impact will depend on basically three things: how fast the incidence and the death on account of COVID-19 tapers off. And you all heard the expression called flattening of the curve, which China achieved. Whether we get a new wave of death later, as there are some of the bioscientists have predicted that even after the flattening of the curve, tomorrow there might be something like an uptick. Huge monetary and fiscal stimulus. In India, RBI has done lots of things. They have pumped huge amount of money for various banking sector. But RBI can only pump money. It's you and me who need to go to the bank to take money. So unless we have appetite for loan, unless we have appetite for those credit, the RBI doing all those activities will be futile. And you expect no fresh external shock, by which I mean no foolish president suddenly today says that I'm going to attack China. All those external shocks should not be there, because we have seen in periods like this, irrationality often comes in. And the worst thing is you expect the new normal in shape of things to come is going to be a less globalized world unless we take conscious, collective, corrective actions. Unless we do that, the new thing is going to be absolutely the less globalized world, and that's not good for the whole global economy. I'll end with one note. I have seen some discussion. I'll take 2 minutes more, maybe. Okay. I've seen a discussion in the newspapers, in the media, that it might favorably influence us some of the investments might get relocated from China to us. Now, I'm not too exuberant about it. They might happen in the margin, but end of it, please note, China's global supply chain is hugely deep-rooted. I was looking at the numbers. I've looked at something like 2000 to 2019 Chinese investment. They're mind-boggling numbers. Even where there is not enough financial investment, there is huge amount of construction and mining activity. China has gone on a spree of construction and mining activity in sub-Saharan Africa, in Latin America. Of course, in the Chinese scheme of things, whatever Mr. Trump says, the most important thing is Europe. Even if China gets a backlash from Europe, they have alternative markets. They will be affected, no doubt, but that does not mean will be hugely favorably affected. The initial impact might come to countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, those countries where China is already there. So if there is any imposition of certain kind of restriction by the American authority, they can always be bypassed via a conduit in Vietnam or in Malaysia, countries like that, or in Indonesia, countries like that. So I don't expect there will be huge impact on China, or this is the end of the story of China. Because I have seen, of late, China has been hugely diversified. So in short, while you do not know enough, the future does not look to be very bright. If we have within this quarter, that's April, May, June, this containment takes place, the curve comes flatten, then we'd expect from July onwards, even if the new normal slowed down growth comes in, perhaps we'll be able to achieve 1.9 or 2% growth. Even that's going to be fine. But if that containment doesn't happen within June, we are waiting for not so bright future. I think I'll stop here. Feel free to ask me any questions you have. Though I'm sure, and please remember there is no silly question, only the answers could be silly occasionally.
Mr. Ray, I would just only thank you for such a lovely insight.
You have to be a little louder possible, or maybe I'll increase the...
No, I will increase my volume. I think I'm talking too low. So yeah, so I would say thank you for so much of insight. I think there are many questions because I'm seeing the chat box booming up with questions. So I will open the room for the people to ask the questions. So we have Mr. Yogesh Dasani wanting to ask a question. Mr. Dasani, could you please? Please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Okay, hello.
Yeah.
Sir, I have a small question.
Yeah.
Like, will we see more of countries favoring their own product and services and death of globalizations in coming months?
I understand the question. I would say don't believe in 0 and 1. Thus I use the term new normal. It's not like any 0 and 1 game that you are going to have. It's more like, yes, the world is going to be less globalized because at this current juncture, there is definitely an anti-China feeling. And since for the time being at least, movement of people, movement of goods and services could be difficult, a year and 2 will be difficult. 1. Having said that, let me tell you, globalization did not come out of milk and motherhood statement. Globalization came out of sheer strength of cost economics. People didn't come to Bangalore out of any philanthropy. People came to Bangalore because they realized it makes sense to go there because these guys give us the same service, if not better quality of service, at half the cost. As long as the cost differential exists, it becomes very difficult to stop the whole story of globalization.
Okay.
Does it answer you, or you?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So we have next person, Mr. Sumanta Bose. He was typing in the chat box. So Mr. Bose, could you please go ahead and ask your question?
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
My question is, in this pandemic situation, people buy less and try to save more. It shows lack of effective demand in the current market. Strategies should be taken by the government for creating demand in the market.
This is $1 million question. One of the things is government needs to spend more. Look, who are the guys in the economy? There are three major. I mean, this is basically, it could be household, farms, and government. In a situation like this, as you have rightly said, people may not be spending enough, firms may not be spending enough, the government needs to come in. Now, let me answer it. It is slightly more detailed so you get a hang of it. Why government is unable to spend more? You have seen the budget. Government is extremely cautious about one number called fiscal deficit. Why? Because this fiscal deficit number as per budget is a gross underestimate. Number of people have pointed out that if this is an underestimate 3.6%, it could be as high as 5%. And then add to this, the states is around another 3.5. So 8.5 fiscal deficit of the Indian nation is a big number. And therefore, government is scared about any rating downgrade, and therefore they're scared about in some way capital outflow. My own perception is if this goes on, perhaps a forum like G20 or something needs to discipline the rating agencies. They have done enough mischief in the 2008 crisis. They needs to be told, all these people need to be told that this is an extraordinary situation. Therefore, it calls for new rating paradigm. Do not downgrade these countries who for a year or so they're increasing the fiscal deficit so that government may start spending.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So next question, I have a question from Mr. Oyen Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee, you can ask your question.
Thank you very much indeed, and good evening, Dr. Roy. This is Oyen Banerjee.
Good evening.
First of all, thank you very, very much for a wonderful discussion. A lot of data points that you showed. It was very, very inspiring. I have a small query.
Yeah.
Sir, while going through the data which the government shares and going to the presentation which you shared, we talked about an 8% growth rate in two successive quarters in 2017-18. And after that, I think the figures have slid it down. So the question is that we have 43% of the population in the primary sector contributing 15% to the GDP. And we have 32% of the population working in the services sector contributing 61.5% to the GDP.
Absolutely.
And as is public data by the government, 1% of Indians own 58.4% of the national wealth. So in the light of this data, Dr. Roy, as economists, what is the relevance or significance of GDP growth rate? Does it show the growth rate of the economy, or does it reflect the economic status of the top, the elite, the creme de la creme of the country? So how relevant is this data while taking decisions at a macro level? So today, even as we speak, we find hundreds and thousands of people walking thousands of kilometers to reach their homes because they have no money in their pocket, even for 2 square meals. So how relevant is this Indian data to take decisions? Thank you, sir.
Very good question. Very good question. Excellent question. Let me tell you, as I said earlier, this is not 0 and 1. So does GDP matter? Yes. Does GDP only matter? No. Does GDP reflect the well-being of everyone? Answer is partial. Let me tell you two very interesting things. Often when we get very emotional about a phenomenon, called inequality. That, you know, this is, as you said, creme de la creme, gets everything. There are ample NSSO surveys to show that what has happened in India is as follows. Rich has become richer, poor also has become richer, but the extent of gap between them has increased.
Please put yourselves on mute.
So, can I continue? Okay.
Yes.
So what I was telling, essentially, rich has become richer, poor also has become richer, but the gap between them have increased. So therefore, what you essentially see, the extent of inequality, increase in inequality in India is lower than compared to other countries. Like China, the inequality is far more. United States, the inequality is far more. What has happened in India, along with a mild increase in inequality, the quality of public services has come down heavily. That has hurt the poor. I mean, when was the last time anybody in this room visited a government hospital for treatment? When was the last time you sent your son or daughter to a technically municipal school? So the quality of public service has been awfully bad in India. That had hurt the poor more, even if their income has gone up. Of course, they have not gone up as that much as the other guys. It's like if Mr. Ambani's income has gone up, real income, adjusted for inflation, by say 100 times, your domestic health income has gone up by 1.7. But both are better off compared to the own past. So to cut a long story short, yes, there's a huge wealth inequality, but the extent of income inequality is much less than the extent of wealth inequality. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well,
So I have Mr. Tripathi looking for a question. Mr. Tripathi.
yes.
I think he's not in the room. So I'll just check for more questions. I have.
Could you be louder, please? Increase your volume,
Yes,
maybe?
Mr. Professor R. Datta, could you please ask your question?
Yeah, good evening, sir. Wonderful to see you. Yeah, and wonderful exposition of, again, as before and as always, it's a pleasure to be looking forward to your sessions. That's how it is. Wonderful. So my small question today is like a few years back, we were all into the brick economy. We were all going, gaga and things like that. As I look at it right now, even today, the virus comes from China. The effect goes to Brazil, 10,000 and more today. The Russian economy is again in tatters to an extent. It's really increasing at a rapid pace or speed today. And we know India. So again, going by whatever statistics that you have really put up, sir, and for the last 8 quarters and more, I mean, this is just not this. It's only been in a downward slide for India to an extent in terms of the growth and productivity. So what is your take? Will BRIC remain BRIC post-COVID? And will it still be the emerging economy for the world to look at post-COVID? Your take, sir.
Interesting question. First, let me give you my own take. In fact, my last book was on BRIC.
Yes, sir.
I'm not a believer of BRIC.
Okay.
To me, it appeared to be a fad. To me, it appeared to be a fad, absolutely a fad, because there is no one common thing. What was the history? The history of BRIC is this gentleman from Goldman Sachs. He wrote a report. Normally, the shelf life of all such reports doesn't exceed 24 hours. It somehow, it was catchy, it was good salespersonship, and it's the end of it, why individually, let me talk on the countries for a minute. Why China is great? China is great because of high investment and high external demand. Investment in China is 50%, and external demand is a capital account. It's essentially a current account surplus country.
Absolutely.
India is a great country not because of investment, not because of exports of goods. India is a great country because of domestic consumption on this thing and on account of services sector.
True, sir.
Brazil is primarily a great country because of commodities. If you take out all those commodities from coffee to aluminium, not much is left in Brazil.
It's there, yes.
Okay, and Russia is great just because it has oil and gas. Without them, Russia does not stand. And South Africa was included later for political correctness because people realize that unless you have a country from the whole African subcontinent, it's bad. So essentially, I mean, I have attended a couple of BRIC meetings at the government level. Two things happen. Inside the meeting room, they say all kinds of bonhamis. The moment they come out, they start calculating back of the envelope what end of the day, what's my gain is.
Absolutely.
So to cut a long story short, BRIC story was never there. But individually, the story of these countries are going to remain. As I say, China cannot go down. India's story, India is going to kick back, going to strike back after a year or so. Brazil, politically, Brazil is a very, very
volatile.
Very volatile after the last prime minister put to jail and all that. So Brazil, as of now, is not doing very well. Russia essentially depends on what is your oil and gas price. If oil and gas price tomorrow shoots up, Russian economy is in a good situation. And South Africa, again, depends on certain number of commodities.
True, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Yeah.
Hello. So we have Mr. Naman Shamshukha asking a question.
So first of all, thank you for that information and the insights you have presented very beautifully, Partha, sir. So my question is, according to you, how well prepared is a typical Indian household for the coming shock of lost jobs and income in the light of the decade of debt, deleveraging, and low unemployment, coupled with weak wage growth and rising income inequality?
Good question. Only I'm not clear about one thing whom you call as typical household. Let me explain. The typical household, if you've been middle class, we can survive maybe sometime. We have certain income cushion, we have certain savings, our standard of living might go down, but we can survive. But if you talk of the bottom 20% of the people, by which I mean agriculturists, by which I mean migrant laborer, by which I mean construction laborers, they are facing a bad situation. So far, government has taken care of. So far, government has been, somewhat generous, not to the migrant laborer, but to others at least. People have got a little bit of ration, etc. But how long they can continue this kind of a stimulus, I'm not too sure. So unless we solve this crisis, hopefully we will, within the next 6 months, their position is going to be really bad. So to sum up, we will be affected, but we can survive maybe for 6 months, 8 months, a year, but they may not be able to survive beyond 6 months. And another thing is happening. We don't realize India internally has become hugely mobile. I mean, we can't think of that the major agricultural laborer in Kerala are from Bengal. In such a situation, when these people, migrant laborers, have come home, it won't be easy to send them back to those states. So therefore, agriculture also is going to suffer, despite the fact the impact of coronavirus has been low in the agriculture and rural sector. In the second round of effect, they are going to suffer. Okay, so that's how it depends on which class you are. I mean, the bottom 20-25 percentile are going to be affected. In fact, because of the large pyramid, I think the guys who are present in this virtual room right now, we all belong to the top 5 to 10 percentile.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, Mr. Datta, can you please ask the question? Mr. Madhusudan Datta?
Please, sir.
Yeah. Partha got a very simplistic and very layman question. I'm picking up two figures from your presentation. One is, which was very concerning, that our GDP was coming down. Last quarter, you said about October to December was 4.8, and projected is 1.9. So during the projections of 4.8, we have seen a hell of a reductions in employment. There was a lot of employment issues which was coming up. Consumerism was hit. Money flow was hit. I'm not going into the other factors, but what I'm saying from a layman's point of view, post-COVID, if the projected growth is 1.9, at 4.8, the situation is so bad for the country. And during 1.9 projection, it will be further down. So laymen like us, at least the working people, I'm not going with the middle class or upper class or the lower class people, who are the laborers, what I mean. What is the opportunity of the employment and the earning scenario? See, if I can say for myself, I don't see anything for the next 6 months, which is what I was doing it. I'm going to sustain in that scenario post-COVID. So if, like me, there will be millions of guys who will be facing in the country. So what is going to be the situation? Though you said, middle class was going to sustain for some time. Sorry for a long question, but I'm just trying to create the environment. So what is the opportunity of work, employment? Because companies have already started retrenching people. So how can we see the scenario 6 months post-COVID, maybe 1 or 2 months after?
So first, more seriously is like, I'm very scared of these questions which are simplistic. Normally they are very profound. But more seriously, in one word, bad, but more profoundly, we do not know. And let me tell you why we do not know. We do not know because when the uptick is going to happen. If suppose, we all know that possibly from next week onwards, there will be some relaxations of the lockdown. If we do not face any further crisis, if we do not face any further increase in the number of deaths and number of infection and actually have hard immunity, then things are fine. But end of it, when will the crisis end? We have one answer: when the vaccine comes in. Till the time, we are all very wishy-washy. We all, you can think of herd immunity to come in, but vaccination is the ultimate answer. So what is the scenario for employment? If we can continue, if we can contain the impact within June, not too bad, but if it continues beyond June, it's very bad. And remember, within Indian economy also have become globalized. When you are globalized, then all those things are going to affect you. When you are not going to get H-1B visa, then your Bangalore model of IT is going to be affected. Then your Salt Lake Sector 5 is going to be affected. That's external demand. But also in internal demand, if you do not, if you're scared to visit a shopping mall, then those guys are unable to sell, and therefore those salespersons are not going to get their salary 2 months hence. We all, we can be generous on a short term. On a longer term, it becomes very, very expensive to be generous.
So what will be the survival mode in that case?
So I only say one thing. I have never seen a doomsday happening. So the doomsday is something, if you are in a crisis, you think of a doomsday and absolutely get paranoid. So my advice will be, don't get paranoid. If history is any guide, we have not seen doomsday happening. In 2008 crisis, everybody expected the financial sector come to a standstill. Within a year and a half, they hit back. In the 1999 East Asian crisis, people thought that the South Korea, Singapore, all these models are over. These countries are gone. They have not gone. They have hit back within 2 years. So I'm saying, when you are inside the crisis, it becomes very difficult to predict the future, because there is a pessimistic bias in you that constantly tells you. Because maybe all of us suffer from a wish fulfillment, thinking that if we think it to be that bad, maybe that much bad will not happen.
I get your point. I get your point. But otherwise, it was a wonderful presentation.
Okay,
It
thanks.
was wonderful. Yeah, Ratna, to you. Next question.
Thank you. Sir, in fact, I am now asking a question.
Yes,
So,
please.
a lot of money is coming from a source of donation, PM Cares Fund. What is happening to all that money? It is, this money is coming to help people increase their livelihood or manage through the situations. So, what's happening to that money? Why isn't India able to even sustain on 15,000 crore rupees, which was given by Tata? 1,500, sorry.
I'll tell you two things
And that's
here.
only one sector I'm talking about. And there is much more money which is coming in.
I'll tell you two things here. First, if you look at the government, one of the very difficult things for the government is to spend money. You laugh at me because all of us think spending money is some of the easiest thing to do. When it comes to government, spending money is a very difficult proposition because the whole cobweb of administration, whole cobweb of bureaucracy is so ingrained, spending money is difficult. That's statement one. Statement two, perhaps at this juncture, we may not be able to answer. There's always a lag there. So far, accepting the migrant laborer sector, we have not seen much starvation related death. I'm not being heartless. I have seen, I'm being absolutely objective, and I'm not favoring this government over the earlier government. As an economist, I'm being paid to be objective. So far, we have not seen starvation related death, excepting possibly the migrant sector. Even in migrant sector, the Kerala model has turned out to be very, very good. I mean, I'm told, I talked to a senior functionary in Kerala Planning Commission. I was told what they did when it comes to the migrant laborers. They realized, very simple thing, that the migrant laborer from UP, they're fed up with having rice in both lunch and dinner. The first thing they did, they introduced chapati in their dinner. One. Second thing, they given each guy 100 rupees worth of just, their cell phone recharge so that they can get in touch with their family. And third, you'll be surprised to know, they have been given carom boards. Now, I'm not generalizing. All I'm saying is, here you have to be much more, depending on the local ethos, you need to be much more innovative. Okay, so how the money is being spent, your guess and my guess is as good, but I have not seen that much of bad sectors, excepting the migrant labor sector.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Mr. Ajitesh has a question.
Please do.
Sir, very good evening.
Good evening.
Sir, I don't know whether this question is too relevant out here or not. But
Please, as I said, all questions are relevant.
Okay, sir. As you were connected with IMF also, so just a small query that post this pandemic, there will be expected poverty as well as unemployment across the globe. How is the IMF going to cope up with that? Because most of the countries will be looking forward for IMF for help along with the World Bank. So my question was to this. I don't know how much I'm able to make you understand about my question.
I understand. Now, remember two things. End of the day, IMF is as good as its board. IMF board these days dominated by US, Europeans, and China. So what IMF is going to do will be dictated by US, Europeans, and China. This is one. Second thing, IMF's basic job is not poverty eradication. The basic job of World Bank is poverty eradication. End of the day, IMF is not a bank. End of the day, IMF gives you balance of payments help. What do you mean by that? You do not have dollar, then you go to IMF and exchange rupee to dollar. So technically, IMF gives you a loan only for balance of payments difficulties and not per se a poverty eradication. They do little bit fringe activity. So it's more in terms of World Bank. World Bank should be more active. One, only trouble with this pandemic is all the advanced countries are affected hugely. So their own fisc is in trouble. Their own debt GDP ratio is at an abnormally high level. So when you are yourself is not doing so well, how much you are going to do philanthropy is altogether a different question.
That's it. Thank you, sir.
So I mean, blunt possibly. I mean, I thought I'll rather give you an honest answer than sugarcoat.
No, that's okay, sir. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Banerjee, you can ask a question. Mr. Oyen Banerjee again.
Yeah, Dr. Roy, sorry for bothering you once again with one more question.
Please do.
There has always been a pull of Indian labor to the first world countries, right? US and Europe being the favorable destinations. Now, given the situation that obviously every pandemic comes to an end, and as you said, there's no doomsday. So in a matter of say 1.5 to 2 years from now, can we expect a significantly more pull of knowledge workers to Europe and to US? What does the statistics say?
I'm not too sure about this. I'll tell you because after this, if the model of globalization takes a hit, there will be at least 1 or 2 years of lull in terms of taking people. I don't know who is the next US president, so none of us know this. But if the number of H-1B visas come down, then we are not too sure about knowledge workers. Just to take the question is a very pertinent question in a slightly broader perspective. There are two kinds of migrant labor we have. One is a white collar who are in Europe and US. The other is the blue collar who are primarily in the Middle East. In the Middle East, I don't think there will be a backlash. Once these things are over, we should be able to go there. But in Europe and in US, particularly in Europe, I'm not too sure because they will take quite some time to make their economy back to their own level. So I would agree with your prediction over a 5-year time horizon, but not a 2-year time horizon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Payal Chatterjee, please go next.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for a wonderful session, sir. It was really enlightening. I have a question like, how do you see small businesses adapting to the new normal? For example, a leather export firm, or similar small-time firms, for them to adapt to the new normal will be a big challenge. How do you see them adapting to the new normal?
Very good question. 3 things. First, small business have lower capital and therefore traditionally they are much more agile, innovative than the bigger ones. It's the bigger ones which have a much more baggage. Now, having said that, please to understand, end of the day, the so-called SME sector do not have deep pockets. Since they do not have deep pockets, unless government does give them money directly, they're going to be affected. And if they are affected, employment is going to be affected hugely. I have seen certain package from the RBI specifically for the MSME sector, but I still do not have the data that how much the MSME sector actually utilized those banks. Because a peculiar thing happened. RBI has made enormous liquidity available to the bank. And what did the banks do? Banks did not give a loan. Banks took that whole money and put it in the reverse repo window of the RBI.
Absolutely.
So that's funny. I mean, RBI should not give banks money so that that money comes back to them and they pay interest out of it. So that's absolutely funny. So that so far SME sector, because one of the things realized, the activity cycle is yet to start. How can you take money before the activity cycle is getting started? First, your activity cycle needs to start and then you start taking it. So the crucial thing is post-lockdown, post-partial liberalization, post-partial, a more flexibility, if they start their whole activity cycle. Then only will come to know the second part of your question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, in the end, Rachna, again, I'm having another question, and that is, what is our exit policy at this point of time?
I'm sorry, what kind of an exit policy? Sorry, I couldn't get it.
Exit policy from this situation. How do you think we are going to come back to this situation?
Oh, this is unknown. I mean, there's a famous expression by the erstwhile US Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld. He said there are three things. One is known knowns, one is known unknown, the other is complete unknown. So this is unknown, you take a small step. So exit, how is the exit policy? I only know the exit policy till today evening. I do not know the exit policy tomorrow. So this is, in situation like this, you take baby steps and realize whether the baby steps are the right direction. If they're not right direction, you take a step back. So I have no clue about the exit policy, and I think nobody has any clue. You, me, and the Prime Minister.
Thank you. There are two more people who are raising hands. I'll just ask quick questions from them. Please make your questions small and short. We are keeping Mr. Roy also on hold. He has another sessions to go. There were two people who were holding hands up. Can you please come up? I cannot find you on the chat box. Who is it? All right. So I think I can only see Oyen's hand up. So Oyens, can you please go ahead and ask your question once again?
No, I think I was done with the question, but if there is an opportunity, I just want to clarify something, sir. Thanks for the permission. We talk about Gujarat and Maharashtra as leading in terms of GDP, contribution to GDP. Now today with this lockdown and the unfortunate consequences of lockdown that we see every day, does it mean that people from other states, for example Bihar, for example UP, for example Bengal, they have significantly contributed to the SGDP of the so-called top 2 or 3 states? Should that contribution be somehow recognized in the new order?
No, yes and no. Money is fungible. You do not know where from the money comes in. You cannot locate a particular currency note moving from point A to point B. So if the Bengali labor contributes to Gujarat SDP and he sends some money back home, that will be reflected by that laborer's family's expenditure in Bengal. So it's already captured. So, essentially when you're Kerala, so Keralite labor will go, the guy who could be a Keralite agricultural laborer will be employed as an electrician in Abu Dhabi. And therefore, his land will be cultivated by a Bengali laborer, Bengali agricultural laborer. So this will be reflected in their expenditure. So if he sends remittances, his family's remittances, and the family buys fruits and vegetables and a television in Bengal, that will be reflected in the SDP of Bengal.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay. So as we are... Any other question?
Yeah, can I, if you permit me, just one, I was just, Professor, yeah, I'm R. Datta here. Professor Roy, just one thing, I was just closing my eyes and remembering the slides that you ran through, sir. And in one of the slides, you did show the impact of COVID, expected impact of COVID on the states. That's how it is. So everyone today would be very happy if they can be uttered this word COVID-free. That every state. So if I look at today's scenario, one state which was never counted baby from compared to the bigger states, never ever. Okay, so one small state very near to West Bengal, that's Sikkim. It's basically known for 2 T's, travel and tourism. That's what the industry there is all about. This state has been the fastest and the only state so far to be declared as a COVID-free state. Now, what, according to you, I mean, despite this being declared a COVID state, the main people who are going over there, forget the foreigners, the biggest chunk goes from internal to the country. The domestic travelers travel there the most. So what do you think, despite not having COVID, such a pandemic, or protecting itself from that, ultimately its economy is going to suffer?
Yes, absolutely. So there are two impacts. One is a direct impact of death. And the second is collateral impact of economic impact. So schemes on account of the first direct impact will be low, but the collateral impact is going to be very high.
Yeah, that's right, sir.
It's like this. Think of it. You confine yourselves to a home for next 2 years. You survive physically, but you are not earning enough to have 2 square meals a day. That's
How do you survive? Yeah. Thank you, sir. Impact and incidents. Thank you.
One more last question. I think it's a lame question, but
Please do.
So according to you, what is the likely recovery part of India in the economics?
I don't know. Honestly, as I said, this will be very foolhardy for me to hazard any forecast on that. I mean, this is too early. I mean, I'm telling you, I have listed enough things that we do not know at this juncture. We do not know if any relaxation of lockdown that's going to happen is going to be very, very adverse in terms of a higher number of affected people. Whether we are going to experience actually flattening of the curve. So therefore, since I do not know any such thing, it will be very foolhardy for me to hazard any guess that, everything is going to be nice tomorrow, day after tomorrow. In terms of certainty, we only know one thing. If a vaccine comes out, then we will be free. We do not know anything else. The rest of it is like in economics, there's a literature called good policy or good luck.
Yeah.
So I do not know how much is good policy, but we need lots of good luck.
All right. So thank you. Sir, one last question from Mr. Mitra. Mr. Devdip Mitra, please.
Sir, very good evening.
Good evening.
It was really an insightful session. But my question is not related to directly economics, something political, but probably if you can throw some light on that. The question is that, is it China's long-term game plan, first to reduce the dependency on the American and European market and making deep inroads in Africa and Latin America, and then releasing the virus so that they control the global economy?
I'll tell you my straight answer to this. After every crisis, you hear a conspiracy theory. I have heard them after 2008 crisis. I have heard them after the conspiracy theory of George Soros in 1999. I have heard them in the oil price shooting up. In economics, they say there are 3 kinds of economics. I mean, this is Paul Krugman once said. One, he said Greek letter, the kind of papers we do, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. The other is called escalator. Escalator is what I said, this went up and something came down. And the third variety of economics is called airport economics. Those books which you typically tend to get only in airport bookstalls that tells you the world is coming to an end. So I'm not a believer of any kind of airport economics. That's my short answer.
Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
So I would like now, basically, like Mr. Chakravarti, our co-convener, to end the session for us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachna, and I should thank Professor Roy for such a insightful session, and you were so candid with your responses and took all the questions in such a hearty manner. That shows your humbleness and also the richness in the topic that you have been talking about. I was thoroughly taking down notes, and I was trying to understand every nuances of your discussions, and I'm sure we had some lovely participations from so many learned members, and I'm sure that, they have also gained so much after listening to you. So on behalf of the L&D Global Kolkata chapter, I thank you for giving your precious time and making us know something which is not probably available in in newspapers and other things. So very insightful discussions we had, and I'm sure everyone has enriched with it. And I would also thank participants for coming and also engaging with such a learned speaker. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. My pleasure. Very good questions. Very enlightened audience. I thought they enjoyed it. Thank you.
Partha, personal thanks to you for accepting this invitation to come and speak.
Anytime. Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Anytime.
It was a really wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay? Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. And all I would say, no chapter is ever functional without its followers on the social media platform. Please go and follow us on our LinkedIn page by the chapter name L&D Global Kolkata. Please go and leave your comments there. How did you like your sessions today? It really helps both me and Partha sir to understand how did you all have enjoyed our sessions. So as like anything else, feedbacks are always welcome. We are there with all our ears open for you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening.
Thanks.
Lovely evening, everyone.
You too.
Lovely evening.
Okay, Rachana. Okay. We can snap it off.
Sir, one last thing. How can we get in touch with you?
You can call any one of us. I think Rachana, you can write to us or you can get connected to Rachana.